theory discussion video. In this, we will be discussing a variety of things from Legends ZA, which still throws me to this day. We will be discussing the best paradox forms and different forms in Pokemon, and we will also be breaking down our hopes for the legends in Legends ZA, including Xerneas. I cannot say the other one, have never been able to, and Zygarde. But I want to introduce our cast. First, we have Archaic. Would you like to say hello, Archaic?
Hello everyone, Archaic here, Bulbacast webmaster, resident old trainer yelling at old terrier. It's good to be back on the Bulbacast.
Good to have you here. And then we have Fitzy as well.
Hey
Would you like to?
everyone. Yes, I would. Sorry, didn't mean to step on you there. Hey
No
everyone,
worries.
it's Fitzy, part of Bulba Garden's social media team. Uh, you'll find me hanging out on our Facebook page and also lurking in just about every channel of the Discord server.
Thank you both for being here. And I don't know about either of you, but I'm actually a big believer that in my personal mindset, the forms of Pokemon are almost becoming like a true gimmick in mechanics to me. But the first question I really want to dive into is what is your least favorite and favorite paradox Pokemon? And I'll
Ooh.
start with you, Fitzy.
Oh no, don't start with. Let's see. Favorite one. Um, I guess I'm just gonna be basic and say my favorite is actually probably Iron Valiant. I love Gardevoir and Gallade. I have been a fan of both of them for about as long as they've existed, and I think Iron Valiant is a really, really cool merging of the two. Um, and for least favorite, it's probably a three-way tie between the paradox forms of the Swords of Justice, Iron Leaves, Iron Boulder, and Iron Crown. They look fine. They are so similar to the Pokemon they're based on. It feels like a missed opportunity to me, especially with all the liberties taken on the Paradox versions of the legendary beast. So those would probably be my top and my bottom.
I have to spend a moment honoring that. I forget where I heard it, but there was a rumor circulating in the Pokemon fandom because of the Paradox Pokemon, like Cobalion, all of those that I know it was a joke largely, but I was in the belief I would rather see them turn into like a mechanized Zord more than anything else. Especially because they are so basic. I knew a couple people were circulating the idea that they would merge together, but I do have to say, Iron Valiant is popular for a reason. I really do believe that. Archaic, are you willing to go?
Yeah, I would say my favorite would be Screamtail. I enjoy the juxtaposition of the normally uh, friendly Jigglypuff and the absolutely feral precursor to it. Um, Having said that, it's kind of ironic what I'd say is my least favorite, which is almost every single future Pokemon, with maybe the sole exception of Iron Valiant and Miraidon, simply because I feel the designs of the future Pokemon are incredibly lazy. Most of them I mean, apart from Iron Valiant, they basically just look like it's the regular Pokemon, but metal, and it feels incredibly dull and not very creative at all. Whereas the ancient Pokemon at least feel like they have some personality to them.
I do have to agree. I feel like I was definitely in the future Paradox form camp when I think it was Maridon is the future one. I get the names confused so much. I thought that
Yeah.
was really cool. And then they just kept revealing more. I'm actually going to jump on the legendary beast train and say that I absolutely love the paradox form of Raikou and Entei. I know they're essentially dinosaur dragons, but the little kid in me just absolutely adores that they are somewhat terrifying, and I feel like they have just really generally cool aesthetics to them. I don't know if either of you agree on that.
I like how different they are from the originals. And I like the two that you mentioned, Gouging Fire and Raging Bolt. I wasn't a fan of Walking Wake when it was announced. Not for any reason I can really pinpoint, it just didn't do much for me.
And I think Gouging Fire is the one that I don't like as much. Like Walking Wake, I'm like, okay, well, it's a Velociraptor. Raging Bolt, right? It's some kind of like Brachiosaurus or Diplodocus or whatever. Gouging Fire, I'm like, is it meant to be a Triceratops or I don't know. It it's a bit more abstract in terms of what kind of dinosaur-like thing it's based off of at first glance. Whereas the others are much more recognizably, oh yeah, I get the reference they're making. This one's like, uh, what?
I mean, I think that's definitely fair. Breaking in, diving into this a little bit further, we've discussed the realm of like our favorites, and I have a question for both of you, which is, do we want Paradox Pokemon to actually stick around, or do we want them to kind of fade into something that's left behind, like the mists of time?
A controversial opinion here. I don't want Paradox Pokemon, or rather, like I feel we're going to get one more, well, maybe two more Paradox Pokemon, and they'll probably be something of like a Pokemon anime movie tie-in the same way that we had a bunch of newly introduced Pokemon in Sword and Shield, like we had what Zarude and that sort of thing introduced late in the generation. Um, but I don't want Paradox Pokemon apart from that because having Paradox Pokemon implies that we've got more time travel stuff happening, and I don't want more time travel stuff. We've had it in Legends Arceus, we had it in this game. Let's find another gimmick to go into rather than having more time travel stuff for the next few generations of games. Maybe they can come back at the future, but for now, time travel's just played out. So leave them alone.
Okay, that is fair. Fitzy, do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I would point out to Archaic that he forgot Heart Gold and Soul Silver while talking about the time travel. Um,
Yeah, but that
but
was
that
that
one.
was generations ago.
No,
It's
I'm just
okay to
kidding.
come back every few
Um,
generations, but yeah, it's
yeah, I don't want more Paradox Pokemon going forward, but for a different reason than Archaic. Um, I like how Paradox Pokemon are a take on the convergent evolutions, like Wiglet and uh the the octopus one. I'm blanking on the name, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. But Wiglet, um, like I hope we get more convergent Pokemon, and I feel like that may come up later in the cast since we're talking about alternate forms and everything. But for Paradox Pokemon, I feel like Paradox Pokemon as a category are a lot like the Ultra Beasts. They are so intrinsically tied to Paldea and to the lore of Scarlet and Violet that I don't really see a way forward to include them that won't feel incredibly jarring. Like I hope that they're made available in future games, like how we can still get Ultra Beasts. But I hope that their like story and lore connection to Pokemon remains in Paldea. Would be my answer.
I think that is very valid as well. I know that Archaic touched on this briefly, and I know that I touched on this briefly. And this isn't one of our planned questions, but I'd love to dive into this a little bit. At this point in Pokemon games, with Paradox Pokemon, regional forms, all of these different forms, do either of you actually believe that, like, Pokemon forms are the mainstay gimmick, and at this point, like, the gimmicks of, like, uh Z moves and terrestrialization and things are kind of the side thing that Pokemon is adding in to add a little bit more flair? And do you think that, like, they're intentionally trying to expand on this to keep it the mainstay gimmick of Pokemon?
I mean, I don't think they're thinking of it as a gimmick. I think they're thinking of it as, oh no, we've basically run out of ideas for Pokemon because we've already drawn on so many real world things that we even had to start making Pokemon out of food. Uh, I mean, it's so hard to think of a completely fresh idea now, but it would be relatively easy to think of a twist on an existing Pokemon to make something new that fits a required archetype. So I feel like we're going to see a lot more regional forms, uh, simply because it's the easiest way for them to actually continue expanding the Pokedex rather than creating like hundreds of completely brand new Pokemon every generation. Um, as it is, I mean, one of the big problems they have right now is how can they ever add a new type? Like, to add a new type right now and to make sure it has enough actual coverage would require the creation of so many new Pokemon that it would be basically impossible. You'd be making every single new Pokemon that you made be of that type. But you could get away with it if the way you're introducing it is more having a bunch of regional forms or convergent evolutions or whatever that are the new type, as opposed to just having like a couple of dozen Pokemon made for that new type out of whole cloth.
I think there's a lot of truth there. Fitzy, what do you think?
Um, I I'm not sure how much I agree with what Archaic said. Um, I do think that whether or not you think it's a gimmick or not, I do think that these regional forms and convergent evolutions are here to stay. I do hope that convergent evolutions become the new norm rather than regional forms. If for no other reason than because regional forms become so awkward moving forward. There's simply like they have to hop through so many hoops to include the regional forms outside of trading, obviously, which isn't feasible for everyone. But with a convergent evolution Pokemon, if they want Wiglet in the game, they can just put Wiglet in the game. They don't need to come up with an excuse for Paldean forms to be in the game. So I think for player convenience, I really hope that is where they're heading. As for the ideas thing, I'm not entirely sure I agree with that. We got some fresh new Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, and I really enjoyed a lot of them. Um, and some of them became almost instant fan favorites. There's art of Tinkaton and its line everywhere. Wiglet was a massive meme, although that one is a convergent evolution. The new legendaries, a lot of people thought they were cool. And there are so many things that Pokemon could draw off of that they haven't yet. Even if they're just reusing the same archetype. Every region's going to have a beginner rodent. Every region's going to have a beginner bird. There's so many rodents and birds that haven't been touched on. There's so many other ways that the rodents and birds they've used could be reinterpreted. I think we're gonna see more convergent evolutions going forward, and maybe, I hope not, but maybe more regional forms. But I think we're also gonna see a lot of new interesting Pokemon, and not all of them are gonna land, but I think more will land than don't.
I think there's a lot of truth there. I'm actually I'm a big fan of regional forms, and I know that in the past, for newer games, they one game that I think is of note for me when I first experienced it, and then this may anger a lot of people, but I was actually really impressed with how Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee incorporated the regional forms, simply by catching either a Sandshrew and trading it or a Vulpix. Mostly because I just like that it was simple and it was an easy trade. But I think there's a lot of truth in both of what you've said. Um, Going into that though, I think additionally what I would add, um, and I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that Pokemon doesn't always land. They come up with ideas people don't like. Um, and I will transition to a question here in a second with this, which is I have been a long time fan of Trubbish and Garbodor. When I first played through Black and White, I hated them. And then I went through my second playthrough and realized how good Garbodor can be. Plus, I love my little trash boy. But going into that, I would love transitioning in. I'd love to say that I actually would love to, and I know we've touched on this in other Bulbacasts, but I would personally love a regional Garbodor and Trubbish. I feel like one of my favorite fan designs was somebody took the island of the garbage island and transitioned that into Garbodor with like a water poison type. I know it's kind of touched on with Galar, but is there a Pokemon that you want to get a form that has not yet? And I realize there's over 1,000 of these at some point, so it might be hard. And what form would you want that to be? And it could be anything from Mega Evolution to regional forms. And I'd love to open this up with Fitzy if you're comfortable starting, and if not, I can dive into what I would love to see in Mega Evolution.
Uh, I would love to see. Two of my favorite Pokemon are Baneri and Venomoth. Um, and Baneri is a base Pokemon, and Lopunny did get a Mega Evolution, which I'm really hoping is in Legends. But Venomoth, I feel, has been a really neglected Pokemon over the course of the games. Like, it wasn't in a regional dex between Johto and Paldea. And I think he's just a cool little guy. So if I was gonna pick any Pokemon to get a little love from Game Freak, in the form of an alternate form, I'd probably pick Venomoth. Um, and I think I'm not really sure exactly what kind of shape I would want that form to take. But Venomoth gets a lot of psychic powers, despite being bug and poison. And I think a more physical type of moth, because a lot of the bug and butterfly Pokemon, they're special attackers and they're delicate. And I think like a physical oriented bug type or butterfly-ish Pokemon would be really cool. And if there's gonna be one, why not my boy Venomoth?
I have to also add to that. I think that's a great point. And to follow up, do you feel like Venomoth being brought into Paldea is potentially a hint for some future love to come in the future to that Pokemon?
Oh gosh. I think the one thing I've learned in 25 years ish of being a Pokemon fan is that whatever you think is a clue to what the Pokemon company's doing next, you're probably wrong. I'd like to hope so, and we'll see what happens, but um my general philosophy is to take everything with several grains of salt. So probably not, but it'd be cool if it was.
I think that's completely fair. And then Archaic, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't have a specific Pokemon that I want to get a, a regional form or a Mega Evolution or whatever, but rather, and kind of connecting to what Fitzy said in a way, I want to see Pokemon that, like, the competitive side of the fandom have ignored and marginalized. I want to see these Pokemon getting forms, variants, Mega Evolutions, whatever, that make them sit up and take notice. Like, let's be perfectly honest here. There are a lot of Pokemon that are ignored by wide swaths of the fandom. Like, I mean, it's a similar problem to what we've got in the TCG, where most of the cards that are printed are nice to look at, but you'd never actually put them in a deck. And it's the same with Pokemon. I mean, even if we're just restricting ourselves to fully evolved Pokemon or that don't evolve, whatever, still a lot of those Pokemon aren't even given a second look by most players. They catch it for their decks, and then that's it. And I just want something that will force people to sit up and take notice of some of these Pokemon again. Make every Pokemon relevant to players.
I wasn't even thinking that way.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, you weren't thinking that way, but I mean, Venomoth would have been one of the Pokemon that I probably would have cited there. I mean, like back in Gen 1, I played through the whole game mono-type bug. And like of the Pokemon I used, I mean Butterfree, okay, great. It got a very nice max form, but did you ever see that actually used in competitive? Uh, Parasect, well, to be fair, Parasect has managed to become meme status thanks to Legends, so people certainly aren't ignoring that evolution line anymore. Uh, but Beedrill, I mean, who cares about Beedrill outside of anime fans who like certain recurring gags? Though, again, it did get a decent mega form. Um, what else was there? I mean, you've already talked about Venomoth, and then, I mean, Scyther,
Levia.
admittedly, Scyther gets a lot of love. Pinsir probably. Has Pinsir been widely used in competitive? I don't know. It has gotten a bit of love in the past, but
It got a mega.
it did get a mega, yeah. So it certainly fared a lot better than most bugs. But yeah, most of the bug Pokemon that I used to love catching and using for the challenge have been practically ignored by most players, and yeah. I like to see these Pokemon get a bit of love.
Well,
I think to add I think to add to that, what I was really happy for in Paldea was a Girafarig evolution. I've always thought that Pokemon was very cool. I know its evolution is a bit odd. I feel like it actually works really well with the evolution line, but that's not a Pokemon that I used in ages in any playthrough because it was definitely not the best. And I love that it's just a derpy, bigger giraffe.
Yeah, no, the evolution for that perfectly suited the Pokemon. Uh, but yeah, things like that that take these Pokemon that like are practically forgotten by a lot of players that so many treat only as Pokedex filler, and that make people sit up and take notice. That's what I want to see.
your mention of usefulness reminded me of Ledian, which is it's really reached meme status with how neglected Ledian is by Game Freak.
Yeah,
And so since we're all focused on bugs right now, Ledian definitely could use some love.
yeah. I used Ledian all the way through Silver and Crystal. Like for me, I knew it wasn't great, but the versatility it gave me as like mono bug, but being able to give it all the punches was actually really good. Uh, so yeah, definitely I'd like to see Ledian get a bit more love again.
Going off of bugs as well, I would love to see more happen with Ariados.
Mm.
Um, I love that spider, but it just does not work.
I mean, I'm just looking forward to when we eventually get an Australian region and we then all of these bugs get just horrific variants that make them some of the most threatening Pokemon in the games. Come on, you know it has to happen eventually.
Just an entire regional dex of bug Pokemon and
Oh,
one kangaroo.
it wouldn't be that bad, but yeah, have a bunch of like bug dark Pokemon, I suppose, and bug poison, and just yeah.
Well, I'm sure that there could be just an entire bug focused Pokemon Bulbacast at some point. But what I would love to dive into really quickly, as we're discussing forms and Pokemon and new typings and things, is to kind of tie this into the upcoming game that very well may have new forms, new Paradox Pokemon. We don't fully know, which is Legends ZA. I'm getting more used to that name. It still throws me. But in this, kind of diving straight into the forms, I would love to ask both of you, do we think that the Kalos starters are going to get mega evolutions in Pokemon Legends ZA? I know that's like a huge topic in the fandom right now. And
I
I can open
mean,
this up to
they should. It seems the most obvious thing to do. Um, but one of the things we need to be careful about here, like if we take the precedent of Legends Arceus, where the first partner Pokemon in that game were not the first partner Pokemon from Gen 4, we might have a completely different set of first partner Pokemon here, and it could very well be all Pokemon that already have Mega Revolutions. Um, but well, I think either we're going to get a set of first partner Pokemon in that game that already have Mega Evolutions, or we're going to get ones that don't already have it, and all of them will get it with this game. I think, yeah, whatever first partners we have in this game, it is a given that they will have Mega Evolutions. Whether it be the the set of Kalos ones if we do get those Pokemon, or whether it be other ones.
I think my answer on the subject is really going to come down to probably, at least from what I've seen, the biggest subject of debate about Legends ZA, and that is the time period in which it is set. If I remember my XY lore correctly, it was heavily implied that while the Mega energy had been around for a while, Megas themselves were still relatively new or rare in the time of XY. And like it was a big deal in XY when you got to the Mega Evolution Tower, that there was only one Mega Stone available, one Keystone, which is why your rival doesn't have Mega Evolutions until the post game. I think if Legends ZA is set in the past, like a lot of people think it will be, I don't think we'll be getting any new Megas. At least I hope we don't, because I'm obsessed with Pokemon lore and I hate plot holes. If it's closer to the present or in the future or some combination of time periods, then yeah, I think we could see more Megas. I think we should. The XY, the Kalos first partners should get Megas. I think it would have been awesome if they'd had them from the very beginning, but they didn't for whatever reason. The only reason I think it might not happen is because of Ash Greninja. They gave Greninja this like pseudo kind of mega form, and they eventually phased it out here in Gen 9. But they may not want to go back to that well. They may not want to deal with the controversy that a Mega Greninja brings to the table. So I'm not sure. There's still so many variables in play, but I'd like to see cool upgraded designs.
I mean, I think the issue of how do you deal with the Bond Greninja itself might be an argument for them to not have the Kalos first partners in this game. I mean, as far as the time period stuff goes, I think we talked about this a bit during some of our Catch a Million streams. But it seems like the historical analog for what's happening in the games is Horseman's renovation of Paris, which was between 1853 and 1870, which makes it roughly the same time period as Legends Arceus, which would have been with the, I believe, the colonization of Hokkaido, or like being kind of analogous to that. So that is colonization by the Japanese from the native Ainu people. So if it's set in the 1800s kind of period, like it's not so far back that it might be before the discovery of Mega Evolution. But it might be like the actual discovery. Like that might itself be part of the the lore that's being developed in this game. I mean, realistically, it probably existed before that, but was like very mythical or what ever, and this is maybe where they're first starting to scientifically document it, and maybe your character will be among the first to actually use it. That would be
Well,
my own guess.
and I wonder if because if I remember correctly, I think the X and Y anime built off of the lore a little bit, and I think Pokemon Journeys added to it a bit more. I can't remember exactly what. But if I remember what I'm remembering as well as I think I do, I think there was some implication, like Archaic said, that it had existed for a long time. Um, but it was kind of how do we do this with Pokemon? How do we make this work? And I think there was mention somewhere either in the anime or in the games of like Karina's family member discovering like mega evolution like generations before or something like that. I can't pull it exactly from my mind, but I also do wonder if they might play with the lore a little bit and make it kind of like Pokemon Legends Arceus, where your character is undoing certain things that have happened in the past and you are somehow messing with the time frame a little bit. I know there's a ton of theories out there about like how Arceus brought the main character back in time to help develop things and prevent wars and all of this discussion. And I wonder if I'm still in the camp. I know this is massively hopeful and is probably not going to be the case, but I would love to see time travel from the past and the future, however that would look in a positive way. And if that's the case, I could see them even bringing the time space distortions into play and messing with the chronology of the Kalos region a bit.
I hope we get to hop all over the timeline just to make Archaic grumpy.
I mean, I will concede one thing. With the From what we've heard, the entire game will be set within the city. Um, if that's true, it probably does make time travel backwards and forwards a bit more likely, if only because uh, it allows them to do a lot more in a more limited space. But it kind of depends on just how big that city actually is. Uh, I mean,
I mean,
Legends,
Lumiose is giant.
well, it's giant compared to other Pokemon games, but how, like, they'd have to represent it much, much, much larger in Legends to begin with. But yeah, just how much larger will it actually be? And I mean, if this is in the past, the city's still growing, theoretically. So, like, how far outside the city limits will we be able to go in the past? Because in the future, the city is in that location. Like, I could certainly see the possibility of us having to go and pacify an area uh, so that you can then slip to the future where the city has now been developed and the city is now in that area where it otherwise wouldn't have expanded before uh, if you hadn't done what you did in the past. Like, I can see that as plausible. I really don't want that to be the case. I, again, I feel like we've had too much time travel stuff. But, well, to be fair, if they are doing more time travel stuff, this is the generation to do it. Like, get it out of the system now in this generation. Because then at least maybe some limited degree. Oh, actually, no. The time span's not big enough that it'd allow paradox Pokemon. Not unless we're going back the full 3,000 years. Like, I guess the time periods matter, doesn't it? It's like, what is
Yeah,
the
that
present day? Like, it could be that the present day for the character is like around the renovation of Paris. So being in what is the past for us, and them traveling to the past is like traveling back all the way to the day of the weapon.
Yeah, like I said, there's just so many variables because we don't know, and my answer to the original question really depends on how some of those variables play out.
Mm.
I think that is very true.
I
I
mean,
know there's
let's think about it this way. With Hisui, how many new Pokemon did we get in Hisui? We
A
had what?
million.
Kleavor, we had the Hisuian Lilligant, like we had a few Hisuian forms, but not a lot in terms of like completely brand new Pokemon. Um, all things considered, Legend ZA will probably be similar in that we're unlikely to get too many completely new Pokemon, simply because the time period's not that far distinct. Well, assuming we are talking about like Renovation of Paris as the main time era for the games, that time period is not that far removed from the normal time period. The ability to add too many more Pokemon in there is a bit more limited. Whereas if we do go far into the future and past, well, then that allows for Paradox Pokemon, allows for a lot more variation. But how much do they really want to add in what is not like? I mean, it's still a core game, but it's still not quite, kind of like the mainline game.
Oh, we'll see.
well, breaking into that, I think that's a wonderful transition into the next question, which is, do we think that Xerneas in Yveltal, I don't know how I'm gonna ever pronounce that, may get new forms in the sense of how Palkia and Dialga got them?
Yes, I think that's a given. I think there's nothing even really to discuss there. It will happen. It, there's no reason not to.
I I I do think it is possible that they will get um new forms. Um some sort of life death imbalance thing that maybe turns them into the super life and death Pokemon. Um but there was actually a conversation that came up in the Bulba Garden Discord server the other day about whether or not Zygarde might get a new form. Um, like we know about its 10% form, its 50% form, its complete form. But whether or not there might be some either hidden form or emergency form or alternate form that's brought about by the events of the game. Um, I think that one has a lower chance of happening, just because the complete form is like the ultimate defender of the balance of nature. But I think it's possible and could be cool.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to say that in the same way Arceus didn't really get a new form in Legends, um, that we're not really going to see a new form here for Zygarde. It wouldn't surprise me if the forms play a more important part of the plot. Um, I mean, we only got X
Well,
and Y before, we never got a Z, and
it is possible. Because you were saying it's a certainty that we're going to get other forms. One thing Pokemon has done in the later generations is fusion type Pokemon. Um, and maybe it's possible that there will be some sort of choice that is made in the game, not exactly the same, but similar to when you choose which tribe to ally with in Legends Arceus. Maybe there's some sort of decision you make in the game that causes one of the two X and Y Pokemon to go berserk, and you end up with a fusion of Zygarde and the other one to bring things back into balance. Like life goes too hard or death goes too hard, so Zygarde has to combine with the other one to rein it in. Is
Yeah,
something that could maybe happen.
yeah. I mean, I could see them doing a Zekrom and Reshiram kind of thing there. Um, yeah, I don't think that's implausible. And really, I think, I mean, what you're saying about having like some kind of choice that you need to make between two factions or whatever that influences the plot, that sort of thing feels very likely in these Legends games, given they're not making them as paired sets. Uh, so yeah, I think that is quite plausible.
And I just to add to that, I know this was a little bit ago when this meme was going around, but one of my favorite things that I've seen in the like, and I say this is a joke, leaks community of Pokemon was someone had made like a Koro, I can't remember the name of the magazine thing that was circulating around with just like the headline of Zygarde gets new form, and they just slapped Mewtwo's head on Zygarde, and that was one of my all-time favorite things that I've seen. It was just beautiful kind of play on the league's community. Um, and I have to agree. I could the other thing that I could see happening in regards to Zygarde, if it does not get necessarily a new form, um, I've always believed that Kalos, and I'm sure other people do, Kalos has this very strong theme of unity. So I could actually see them playing with Zygarde's different forms and have you kind of interact with different areas or track down the Zygarde cells. And whether or not it gets a full form, I could definitely see them incorporating that into the different parts of the story and actually have Zygarde very similarly to, I think it was the X and Y anime where the cells became a massive part of the narrative, or X, Y, and Z anime, and like have that be like a core part of the interactions with the towns and the townsfolk. One thing I do kind of think that could also add to that, if we get ancestors of the Team Flare individuals, I think it would be really cool to watch them experimenting with Zygarde and either, if it happens in the future or the past, to figure out maybe making a distorted Zygarde that you have to battle at some point, and that kind of scenario. Do either of you have any opinions on that?
First of all, let me just say that the things that the Pokemon League community comes up with are really far-fetched, aren't they? Uh, but seriously, putting bad puns aside, um, I, as soon as you mentioned past Team Flare, I just was thinking, oh no, ridiculous uh, French nobility fashions. What could that kind of group get up to there? I I think a lot of these ideas for what could be happening with Zygarde and its cells are quite plausible. Um, a lot of it, I feel, comes down to how they actually do the plot. I mean, the more that they do, say, a time travel-ish plot, the less that some of these options with Zygarde would be plausible. I mean, actually, for that matter, as soon as you introduce time travel elements, then you have to think, well, how are you going to handle that with all of the other elements that we expect to see in the games? Like, if we expect to have a Team Flare analog or something involving like Team Flare ancestors or descendants or whatever, like that gets to be a lot harder and a lot more convoluted if you add time travel. If you want to have something with Zygarde, well, it feels like you'd only be collecting Zygarde cells within a single time period rather than having them strewn throughout time and space. So,
Nah, I don't think that matters.
uh,
I think you're worrying too much.
I,
It's
like,
it
I mean, I accept that since it's a Legends game, the plot is allowed to be a bit more convoluted than a regular Pokemon game, but it still needs to be understandable. It shouldn't be on the level of Metal Gear. And I feel like if we add all those elements together, it's going to become very convoluted.
well, my opinion, Roadhawk, to your question. My answer to your question is I'm hoping for one thing if we get a past or future version of Team Flare. I want exactly one thing, and that is if Lysander gets an ancestor in Legend ZA, I want it to be an opposite gender ancestor, the way Cyrus got, and I want her to have a super long ponytail like a female Pyroar has. That is the only thing that matters to me.
If we get an ancestor of Lysander, I want them to be a stereotypical French aristocrat with twin tails that goes
Now,
the oh ho 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 ho.
it's got to be a lady. It's got to be a woman with female Pyroar hair,
No, that's what I meant.
just for that
A
mirror to life.
woman with the whole oh ho 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 stereotype.
Oh, the noblewoman's laugh.
Yeah, with the ridiculous twin drills. Go
But
full out and embrace the tropes.
I will also say, in a more serious answer, Roadhawk, I'm a huge fan of the Team Flare scientists. I think they were criminally underused in XY, and I think their designs are really cool. And so if we are heading into a different time period and we see precursors to Team Flare, I would love to see them take the designs of the Team Flare scientists and do something really interesting with them, because I think it was a huge missed opportunity
Actually,
in the original Kalos games.
on that point, I guess Team Flare does have enough variation in their symbolism that you could get away with having the past versions of Team Flare analogs being the more fashion types, and then future version of Team Flare analogs being based on those Team Flare scientists and putting the fashion side aside.
I, in all seriousness, I have to agree as we're discussing Team Flair's fashion choices and the possible. I would love to see all of that happen. What I would love to see a little bit more now that we're talking about this, and we could probably do a whole like, what are the theories around Team Flair's ancestors or descendants or whatever. But I would love to see some variation in the class structure um, of Team Flare, like some of them being aristocrats, some of them not, and having that. I don't think Pokemon's going to get that political at all, but that would be really cool. Um, really quickly, because I want to make sure that we don't turn this into a fashion discussion. Um,
I mean, we're talking about Pokemon forms and regional forms, and what is that but Pokemon playing dress ups? Though I guess we haven't talked
that
about cosplay Pikachu yet.
that is true, and I am a longtime believer that one of Pokemon's biggest things is fashion in games. They seem to be really centered on that. Um, and we can actually definitely throw that in. We have time. Going off of past Pokemon forms, what do you all think is the most unique or something that stood out to you? Could be cosplay Pikachu, could be anything else that has popped up. For me personally, I think the first time I saw a Alolan Muck and utilized it, that Pokemon has been one of my all-time favorites. I've never been the biggest fan of poison types until actually Paldea. They really won me over. But the way that they handled a Alolan Muck is one of my favorite designs Pokemon has ever done. And Fitzy, I'll actually go to you first if you're comfortable. What's one of
Uh,
your favorite forms?
Favorite forms? That's a good question. Um, I feel like it would be wrong of me to not mention Unknown. I remember being blown away by all the different forms Unknown had when Gold and Silver came out. But they were all introduced in the same game, so that seems a little off the base that you're going with.
Well, they weren't all
Um,
introduced in the same game.
well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The idea of the unknown forms. Um, I do remember I am a massive ice Pokemon fan. I love ice Pokemon. I've had an ice Pokemon in almost every team I've ever taken through a story. Um, and Vulpix has been one of my favorite Pokemon forever. Um, Going all the way back, probably around when Brock got his Vulpix in the anime, is about how long I've been a Vulpix fan. And so Vulpix and Ninetales getting their Alolan forms, the Ice Alolan forms, that made me really happy because it was an intersection of my favorite type and one of my favorite Pokemon. And Alolan Ninetales is just so sleek and gorgeous. Um, I have nothing against original Ninetales. I love original Ninetales, but Alolan Ninetales was I it affected me. Um, that one probably hit me harder than any other regional form uh, that I can think of, um, and probably just um, Clodsire. It's not a form; it's an alternate evolution to a regional form. But like I always liked Quagsire. I thought it was cute. Um, but Clodsire took the cuteness and made it such an effective Pokemon. I remember Clodsire getting so much love from the fandom, not just for its design, but getting a place on so many people's Scarlet and Violet teams when the games came out. Um, so I think going along with circling back to the very beginning of the Bulbacast, the idea of using forms to give love to Pokemon that need love, I think Paldean, Wooper, and Clodsire really did that. So massive respect to Clodsire and probably Alolan Ninetales as an aesthetic favorite.
I will agree with you on those. I love both of them. Alola Ninetales is classic Pokemon design. It's perfection. I do want to highlight as a massive Pokemon Masters fan, really quick. They did just introduce Rika and Clodsire to the game, which I'm super excited about. And one of the things that I loved in their Instagram teaser was they had one of the original characters just say, "It looks like a giant chocolate cake." And that is one of my favorite lines in Pokemon Masters, probably because I love Clodsire so much, but I love the fact that they are playing so heavily into the fact that it's just a mound of chocolate, essentially. But Archaic, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that Alolan Ninetales is top tier for regional forms. That's unquestionable. I think Galarian Rapidash is up there as well. That just made so much sense, especially with like how big things like My Little Pony and that had been over the past decade. It just made so much sense for them to jump on that. Um, I like this one. Okay, so I like Hisuian Zorua for a lot of the same reasons. Hisuian Zorua, not as big a fan, but Zorua, very nice. Um, I will say I noticed
Hey,
one thing
I
that
don't want
we
to interrupt you, Archaic. I think it might just be an accent difference. But I could not tell the difference between the two Pokemon that you just said.
Hisuian
Which one is it
Zorua
that you're?
and Hisuian Zoruark.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
it probably is a pronunciation thing because I'm so used to saying the Japanese names for Pokemon rather than the English names that I often go and lean more towards those and how I pronounce them. But anyway, actually, I wanted to note one thing in particular with regional forms because I thought this Pokemon was surprisingly relevant to uh, X and Y, or rather to ZA. Um, Lilligant and Hisuian Lilligant. You look at those Pokemon, and doesn't Lilligant look almost a bit like how you would expect, say, an aristocratic type to dress, whereas Hisuian Lilligant basically looks like a ballerina, which again you would associate with high society in France. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if we see both of these regional forms in ZA.
I could see that. They definitely have like a French aesthetic to them.
And I mean, from what you said on the Unknown, I wonder if we could get new variants on the Unknown in ZA for like, you know how in a lot of like continental European languages you've got like the accents over characters and so forth, like you have the E in Pokemon.
Hmm.
Wouldn't it be interesting if we had a regional form of some of the Unknown to give us the accents?
That would
I
be
think
very cool.
I think if nothing else, I would be really intrigued to see how they pulled that off in the unknown.
I mean, it feels very silly, but Unknown is
Pokemon is
silly to
serious
begin with.
business. I don't want silliness in my Pocket Monsters game.
I mean, I think it could be very interesting to see them doing something along those lines. I mean, heck, even if you've got like past and future, if you've got a future, you need one that's shaped like the at sign.
Most true. I was thinking of this. I don't want to be too cheeky, but Archaic mentioning Galarian Rapidash, I have to give a special shout out to Galarian Meowth and Berserker. Um, in my design, probably one of the biggest upgrades to a base Pokemon I've seen in a long time. Berserker is just a monster, and I love the Viking element in it.
I do love Berserker. I like it a lot better than a Alolan Persian. I'm gonna go on the record and
Yeah,
say that.
a Alolan Persian has It's not Garfield's face. It's that other cat
Heathcliff.
cartoon. What's it called?
Heathcliff.
Heathcliff. Yes, that's it. It has Heathcliff's face. It's. I can't unsee it. It's.
It really could have been a great design, and it's just that one design choice that throws it off. It's not great. Um, but just due to everything, the last couple of questions I'll start off with, which is leading up to the last one. What starter do you most want in Legends ZA? And what typing would you want it to gain?
I'll go ahead and start because I have three answers and going along with what has sort of become a theme of the night of Pokemon getting love that feel like they need some love. I would really love to see. I don't know which water starter I would want to see. Assuming they cherry pick from all the past regions like they did with Legends Arceus. But for the fire and grass starters, I would really love to see Tepig with an alternate version of Embor and Chikorita with an alternate version of Meganium. I think if you look at the history of Pokemon fandom, I think those two get the biggest bum raps of any of the starting Pokemon. And I would love for them to get something of a redemption arc. I would love for them to get some love. So I would definitely say Chikorita and Tepig, and then maybe Poplio for the water starter. I think of the water starters, Oshawott was just in the other legends. Mudkip and Piplup. Well, they get a lot of meme love. Same with Feraligatr, not quite as much, and then obviously Blastoise. So I think Poplio or Totodile for the water starter. I don't know what types I would want them to be. Literally anything. I would love for Chikorita or Meganium to get a second typing that makes it a little less squishy than a pure grass type. I would love Tepig or Embor to get anything other than fighting. Because I think Embor is a great design. I think it's a fun Pokemon. And I think it gets a lot of undeserved hate for something completely outside its control, which is being the third firefighting starter in a row. So I would love for it to get a type that isn't firefighting and a chance to get some real love from the Pokemon fans.
To jump in really quickly, I saw a great YouTube video where they gave Embor a fairy fire type and based it off of French cooking. It was really cool to see. They basically made it like a pretty sadistic chef, but it was really well designed. Um, and then Archaic.
I could see that. I mean, if we're let's make an assumption here for a moment that just like Legends Arceus before it, that we're going to get a set of first partner Pokemon that's one from Johto, one from Unova, one from Alola. I'm just going to make that assumption for no clear reason apart from trying to avoid Kalos and trying to avoid Sinnoh. So, from Alola, Popplio seems the most relevant to a French setting. I mean, you've got both clown and singer. I mean, it seems like it could suit French society. That makes sense. Uh, Johto, if we've already got a water, we can't go Totodile, and I think it'd be hard to do a crocodile anyway. Chikorita seems like it would make the most sense. Gives us, I don't know, nice in a salad. I don't know. To be honest, I mean, we can't go with Cyndaquil, so that one's more of a process of elimination. Kind of unfortunate, actually, because I would have thought Snivy might have suited, like, again, French society, but maybe that's just jumping on its whole meme status as Smugleaf from back in the day. But I can definitely see now that you mention it, the whole using like the Tepig line to connect into French cooking. That could be amusing. So yeah, no, I can see that combo. Um, I mean, I don't think they would use any Gala or Paldea first partners. I don't think you'd use the Kanto ones. And looking at the Hoenn, like about the only thing that might suit there is again the Torchic line, and for the same reason as the Tepig line would work, connected into French cooking.
Yeah. The only reason I didn't really look at Hoenn is because the Hoenn starters have megas.
They do already have megas, yeah. Whereas none of the other ones we talked about have megas yet, so it would make it easier for them to add megas. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if all the Sinnoh starters are in the game anyway. Just not as your first starters, not as your first partners.
There you go, Roadhog. Same trio for slightly different reasons.
And I think partly just to be different. I'm gonna go off of what I would love to see. To add to my own points. I know this probably won't happen, but the number one that I want to see is actually Turtwig. I love Turtwig. I feel like Torterra could turn into either a really great grass fairy type with like building off of like fenced in gardens and things and kind of certain aspects of aromas and perfumes. I don't know as much about French culture, but I would love to see that. Off of that, I would really love to see something happen with Incineroar, kind of playing off my ideas. I think it'd be really cool to give a nod to the Aristocats, the old Disney movie, and have like some kind of fancy cat that is either like a stray of some kind and playing into that with like some other possibly even psychic type with some of the like health issues of cats and how it can affect the mind. And the last one I'm going to pick because it's so hard to do. Um I'm just to be different and play off of something that's probably not even an issue. I would love to see Totodile and Feraligatr to get a new form, and I would love to see them either do something with Circus or something involving sewers, and kind of playing off of the idea of development and how that can cause harm. Again, I don't think necessarily any of these are going to happen, but these are kind of my top hopes.
So you want
Oh.
sewer crocodiles? I mean, if we were
In the
talking
Pokemon world.
Louisiana, which to be fair was a French colony originally, then I could see that working. And actually, you know what? Uh, how long did they have Louisiana?
Actually, you know what would be a really cool water type first partner for Legend ZA? Would be Sobble. which I don't think is outside the realm of possibility because we had a Gen 7 first partner in the Gen 8 Legends. Why not a Gen 8 first starter in the Gen 9 Legends? And I think a take on an alternate version of Inteleon that is a take on Arsène Lupin, the Gentleman Thief, the original Gentleman Thief, I think could be a really cool idea and design.
I agree that there should be some Pokemon in here that links to Lupin. I don't know if they'd have one of the first partners be it, but definitely there should be some link somewhere. It's such an obvious reference that Japan loves. I mean, and we've already had arguably references to things that are references to Lupin. I mean, as in like Looker was basically a reference to Zenigata from the Lupin the Third franchise, in many ways. Like, actually, yeah, there should be a Looker analog in these games, shouldn't there?
There should be Looker in every games. It should be the actual Looker who fell through a wormhole or something.
I could actually see that happen, like a whole storyline similar to Ingo, and he's lost and confused trying to figure out about time travel. That could really work.
I mean, either that or we get the other one of the brothers. It's the right time period to be playing with trains as well. And oh, geez, if we are doing a whole redevelopment of Paris, can you imagine how much fun uh, those subway siblings would be having in France, just playing with trains in what is basically the Industrial Revolution. Geez, if we don't have Emmett now,
I kind of hope they don't do Emmett just because it feels like a return to the well. I'd rather see something different
mm,
if they did anything like that.
but I mean, if they're doing the time travel stuff again, I think having Emmett would be fine. If anything,
I
now
mean, we
you've
could
put.
talk.
I mean, if they are doing the time travel stuff again, and it is in like that same time period, which is analogous uh, to the Legends Arceus time period, then having Emmett there basically at the same time in the past as his brother would like it, thematically it would give them the opportunity to reunite at some point. So
Eh.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Oh, I'm a sucker for happy endings. I just mean from like an aesthetic point of view. Explore something different. But that's a bit off topic. And we could go all night on stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
considering we've gone completely off topic from what was meant to be a discussion on forms, but I mean, yeah, like uh, no matter which first partner Pokemon we get in ZA, I think that they will end up being Pokemon with Megas. If they don't already have them, they will get them. So we'll either have a set of first partners that already has them, or we will get a set of first partners that don't have them but will get them in this game. I think that whatever we get, that has to happen.
I think that is so true. Just for the sake of time, for the sake of a conversation, and I can guarantee that there are so many different topics that we could dive into, and I have future Legends ZA conversations in the works. But what I would love to do, for the sake of the cast time, for those listening, I would love to wrap up with one final quick answer question, which is if you, well, I should actually say Alolan Ninetales or Clodsire. Which one would you choose? And I'll start with you, Archaic.
Oh,
And if you want to give,
Ninetales.
awesome. Is there anything that you are excited about coming up for Bulba Garden?
That I can reveal to people at this point in time. Okay, so coming up in the near future, you'll be able to use your Bulbapedia account to log into the Bulba Garden forums and vice versa. Uh, we we had to get the Bulbapedia upgrades that we did earlier this year in place before that could be set up, but now there's just a few back-end tweaks that need to be made to get that all properly enabled. So finally, after 2 decades, it will be proper cross login to all the Bulba Garden stuff.
Wonderful. And Fitzy, Clodsire or Alolan Ninetales?
Uh, Alolan Ninetales, and then I hate myself for it because that's a hard choice.
Um, and I think I've got to go with Alolan Ninetales myself, just because it's been around longer. I've had more games to play it in. I do really quickly want to highlight a couple things. I know this video will be going up on YouTube. We have a variety of really awesome projects. We've got Pokemon Masters shorts that go up on Wednesday and Saturday. I know that we have a mono flying type, I believe BDSP playthrough going up on Twitch. We've had some really awesome things. We just had the Catch a Million not that long ago. We've got a ton of amazing programs and other things coming up. If you want to check us out, please feel free to do that. If you're already listening, we want to say thank you for your time. On top of that, I want to say really quickly thank you to Archaic and Fitzy for this wonderful conversation. Other than that, I want to wish everyone a good night. I hope that your dreams come true with Pokemon forums. I hope that Legend CA lives up to your hype. Really quickly, I will say goodbye. As a reminder, I am Roadhawk, your perennial host at this point. And with that, do you want to say goodbye?
Oh, well, it's great to be on the Bulbacast again. I don't know how often I'll be around, but yeah, I hope I'll see you all soon. Maybe on one of my regular Twitch streams. So take care, everyone.
Thanks for having me on. See you guys next time.